This picture was used to illustrate an article on face blindness, and you'll probably have the same reaction to it that I did. I read the article and then I went back to that and thought, well, who are they? Why those people? Because as you can see, they've all got different clothes and different hairstyles, and the fact that they all had the same face went straight past me. I worked it out in the end because there's a little smudge on the chin. This was when I first discovered face blindness through an article in the Times, and like everyone I've ever spoken to about it, the overwhelming sense at that point was relief, because you suddenly discover that it's a real condition, it has a name, it has an explanation, there are other people out there who have it, or in this case all around you, and most of all, it's not your fault. Embarrassment. We've all been there. Some incidents are more traumatic than others. Before I knew about face blindness, I realised now that I was living in a permanent state of low-level confusion with fairly frequent peaks of acute embarrassment. This has never happened to me, but I know from the email list of quite a number of people who have gone to collect a child from daycare and have actually picked up the wrong baby. And you know, how embarrassing is that, particularly if the real mother is somewhere nearby? I don't think, even if you knew the explanation for what you've done, that would go down too well in those circumstances. And if neither of you knew what was going on, I don't even want to imagine that conversation. Our problem is that we are constantly trying to function normally, or at least appear to be normal, but we are missing large chunks of information. And sometimes the brain tries to fill in the gaps, and sometimes it doesn't get it right. This illustrates quite well how ludicrously it can go wrong sometimes. I was flipping through a magazine and there was a picture of Brian Cox. Well, that was okay. I'd watched his series. There was a picture of the solar system alongside it. Not a problem. I went over the page and there was another picture which to me looked very similar. Same angle, hair more or less the same, and because I'd just been looking at the first one, I thought I had a match. There was only one slight snag. In this one, Brian Cox seems to be wearing a dress. So my brain helpfully joined in and said, that's all right, it's comic relief this week. Everyone's doing strange things for comic relief. Brian Cox in drag, why not? And then I read the caption, and it was an actress called Amelia Bullmore. That doesn't matter when it's pictures in a magazine. There's no one to be offended. But when you get into that sort of tangle with real people, you can get into the most bizarre conversations, as I'm sure you all know, simply because we are constantly trying to look for facts to support what we think we're seeing. And it doesn't always work. One thing you have to decide, even if you're not conscious of it, when you discover you're face blind, is whether you tell people about it. And if so, who do you tell? I mean, it might be just your close family, acquaintances, colleagues, everyone you can get to listen. I've found that the easiest people to talk to about it are casual acquaintances or people you've only just met, because, to put it bluntly, they don't care enough about you to be disturbed by what you say. So I usually have just a throwaway line of, when we meet again, I probably won't know who you are, I've got this condition where I can't recognise faces. And the response to that falls into three groups. They're the ones that look completely blank and you wonder if they've heard, but at least even in those cases it means you've covered your back, and if you get it wrong later, well, you did warn them. A few people will be interested and will actually ask questions at that stage, not many. And of course the classic, oh, I can't remember names either. I haven't found a polite way of dealing with that one. And they're always so sure it's the same thing.
Or you will, you do remember, you do recognise me, don't you?
Yes, oh yes, that one. Yes, well, you've been wearing that coat for the last 3 winters.
You're special.
When it comes to close family or friends that have known you for a long time, they are going to have a much more fixed idea of who you are. And that will probably include quiet, shy, introvert, and probably not very good with people. And if you come bouncing along with a whole new personality and say, this is me now, that people don't like having their ideas upset. You may get resistance at that stage. I've been lucky with this one because both my husband and son are intrigued by it, and my daughter also has it, so I haven't had that problem. If you get somebody that is important to you that is really being resistant to it, there is a lot of information out there. I know from the internet somebody whose partner says, well, I've never heard of it, so it can't be true. So she's got a lot of work to do. I would say be a bit careful about the form that your information takes because, well, if it's somebody under 30 you're trying to convince, don't give them 5 close type pages out of New Scientist, give them a couple of links to YouTube. If you are not quite ready to come out but would like to do something to raise awareness, try the bookmark trick. There's some on the table over there. Take some to your local library. Don't put them on the counter, they'll just end up as shopping lists. And don't ask permission, because you'll get into a very confused conversation which will end up with being told you can't do it. Just go quietly to the health section and put them in any books on child development, psychology, stroke, autism, and anything by Oliver Sacks. And that way they will be found by people who are in the general right mindset. We all have trouble with films and television. We spend our lives driving our families mad. I mean, every time a character changes clothes, well, who's she? Where did he come from? Why are they in bed together? Well, they just got married. No, they didn't. Her hair was different. And at this point, if you're doing this at the cinema, by now you'll have someone poking you in the back and saying, please shut up. Quite a lot of face-blind people like science fiction films simply because the characters there are usually signalled by something other than the face. And I guess if you've just got to count how many arms they have, it probably is easier. For me, this is the perfect film. One man, one woman and a boat. These are some of the things you might like to try to avoid, although it isn't always possible. I've spent my whole life avoiding using people's names, in spite of all the advice in the self-help books, because I know from long experience that I can have a 10-minute conversation with somebody and they'll go away quite happy with no idea that I don't know who they are, but you've only got to use the wrong name. So introductions are the A level of name using. You've got to be absolutely certain of not just one person, but 2 at the same time. And I don't find that happens very often. Really, the only honest thing to say at that point is, I'm terribly sorry, but I haven't the faintest idea who either of you are. Would you like to introduce yourselves? But you might want to practice that one at home a bit first. You'll probably go through the whole of your life without getting involved in an identity parade or having to look at police photo fits. But I've always dreaded the idea of trying to convince your average local copper that this is a waste of his time and mine. In fact, since I've known about face blindness, I've always made sure that I've memorised Brad's email, because if it ever happened, you're going to get a message saying, please convince them I can't do this. Uniforms are bad news. Even if you can manage to stay away from services and police, the high street is full of it now, corporate clothing. If you go to the bank and then you have to go back with a query and you want the same person, and all you know is she was wearing blue, not going to help. And the supermarket's the same, the travel agent, and somebody mentioned hospitals earlier on. I'm not even going to start on hospitals. That could be a whole morning's discussion in itself. Probably the worst situation when you're face blind is having to go to a funeral. Although I know Stina would say weddings are as bad. You're confronted with a large group of people. Some of them you have genuinely never met before. Some of them you may have known since the day you were born. And they will all be wearing unfamiliar dark clothes and unfamiliar subdued expressions, and it simply isn't the moment for going into complicated explanations about prosopagnosia. All I can suggest with funerals is don't ever go to one on your own. Make sure you've got somebody from that area of your life who is going to save you from the worst disasters. And the last one is easy, Crime Watch. That is a whole hour of television which consists entirely of being asked, do you recognise this man? And you know the answer to that without switching on. So that's an hour of your life you can get back and do something more useful with. There are a few things that we're better at. Now you know you can forget about faces, they're just an irrelevance. Two particularly useful things are how people stand and how they walk, because those don't alter. People aren't aware of them, they stay the same. I've occasionally been out with my husband and we've spotted somebody perhaps 100 yards away with their back to us. And I know who it is, and while he is still saying, could that be so-and-so over there? And it doesn't happen often, but it's very satisfying. Body shape is good as well, because although that can change, it doesn't do it in an instant. Hairstyles, I do rely on hair a lot, but it's not reliable. I know of someone who watched a colleague who he knew very well, who had long hair, and he once saw her putting her hair up into a ponytail, and he described it as disappearing before his eyes. She became someone that he'd never seen before. I find backs of heads are good. I can sometimes sit at the back of a meeting and pick out more people that I know than if I was standing at the front. And I found that very useful when I was teaching, because I taught IT. And in an IT class, they all sit round the walls with the backs to you. Very good. You seem to have stuck. I put in a few of these. They're headlines from articles that there have been in the past. You would probably identify with some of them, possibly not the top one. And while I was preparing this, I was wandering around the internet and I found a cartoon which I thought would be the perfect finish for this bit. Thank you.